Here's an overview of the short story The Red Door by Iain Crichton Smith. The where, the when, the what and the who. Where. The setting in place for the Red Door is a small rural village described as a drab landscape, where the protagonist of the story, Murdo, has spent his life endeavouring to fit in with the other inhabitants in order to be accepted. However, we sense, as the story progresses, that this attempt to conform has meant him sacrificing his own identity and individuality for many years. The name Murdo, together with references to porridge, reading the Daily Record newspaper, the volume of the sea, and peat, the soil, not the person, suggests to the reader that the story is set in a quiet coastal community in the Highlands. Typical of such villages, this is the sort of place where if anyone dares to do anything remotely different, they will immediately stand out and risk being isolated and or thought of as being odd, as happens to Mary. When he discovers that his door has mysteriously been painted red overnight, Murdo reflects that never in the history of the village had there been a red door before. Green, yellow and even blue, but never red. In fact, so conservative, with a small c, is the community, that Murdo fears they might hunt him out of the village when he contemplates the eponymous red door of the title. In the story, the village can be considered to be a microcosm of a larger society, underlining that the narrow-minded attitudes that prevail in a small community are in fact universal. This suggests that it can be hard for people to retain their individuality within a wider society too. For background information, it's interesting to note that Iain Crichton Smith was critical of the insular, oppressive nature of small communities, such as the restrictive Presbyterian village in which he himself was raised. And indeed this theme features in several of his other stories, including The Telegram and Mother and Son, also set in small communities. When? As we're told in the very first line of The Red Door, the story is set after Halloween, early in the morning. This reference to Halloween introduces the idea of the supernatural, which runs throughout the story, thereby creating a sense of anticipation that something significant or even magical might be about to happen. The theme of the supernatural is developed, for example, when Murdo perceives the earth to be painted with an unearthly glow. Likewise, his now red door is said to be like a magic door that pulses with a deep red light. The story unfolds over a relatively short period of time, just long enough for Murdo to observe the door in puzzlement, but with no feeling of anger, to ponder calmly what might have happened, to worry slightly about what other villagers might say, to have an epiphany, to eat his frugal breakfast, and to walk to Mary's house, hoping to start a new chapter of his life. What? The Red Door explores two main themes. One, the individual versus society, or individuality versus conformity, and two, the reality of life in a small community. Who? The Red Door focuses on the experience of the main character, Murdo, a bachelor who lives alone and leads a fairly uneventful, repetitive life. Murdo has always behaved conventionally, i.e. in the way that the other villagers in his small coastal community expect him to. We're told he would even play drafts with one of them sometimes. Too much excitement. There is also another important character in this story, a spinster called Mary. Although we never actually meet Mary, through Crichton Smith's skillful characterisation, we learn enough about her to establish that she does not conform to the expectations of the other villagers, and that their suspicion and disapproval of her unconventional behaviour doesn't bother her one bit. Murdo suspects Mary of having painted his door red because he has observed that she is an independent and creative spirit. Mary clearly isn't influenced by the opinions of other locals in the way that the long-suffering Murdo is. We are told that she wears the colour red and that she goes out walking at night on her own, so this links her with the painting of Murdo's door during the night of Halloween. Mary's uninhibited act of painting Murdo's door red, a colour symbolic of passion and anger in order to spur him into action, is successful in that it causes Murdo to have an epiphany, perhaps even two epiphanies, and to recognise that he has been suppressing his own creative and nonconformist tendencies for years. At the end of the story, when he determinedly walks to Mary's house and knocks on her door, it's clear to the reader that there is a very real hope that a relationship will develop between Murdo and Mary, and that Murdo will at last be allowed to be the sort of person he has always yearned to be, Let's now look more closely at the characters of Murdo and Mary, and then briefly at the villagers. Firstly, Murdo. Murdo is a 46-year-old bachelor who we're told lived by himself in the village and prepared his own food, darned his own socks, washed his own clothes and cultivated his own small piece of ground. The frequent repetition of the words his own at this point in the story emphasises the mundane nature of Murdo's lonely life in the village. Early on, we form the impression that Murdo is kind-hearted, as we're told that on Halloween evening he gives the children who come to sing at his door apples, oranges and nuts, which we're told he had bought specially in anticipation of his young visitors. His kindness to children is mirrored by Mary's, as we learn that it is she who has made the masks the children wear, thus linking the two characters early in the tale and foreshadowing their potential relationship by the end of it. As mentioned earlier, Murdo is outwardly a conformist, although, as we gradually discover, inwardly he is more reluctant to conform. On the exterior, he's a model citizen, wearing the regulation Wellingtons and fisherman's jersey. Like most of the other villagers, he does what is expected of a member of the claustrophobic small community by not daring to be different in any way. One reason given to explain his local popularity is that he maintains a long silence unless he has something of importance to say. Our sympathy for Murdo is engaged when we learn a little bit about his rather unhappy past. We're told that he was a very serious child and that he was bullied because he lisped. In other words, he had a speech impediment. Moreover, he was clumsy at sport and did not shine academically either, his maths being described as meagre. Things were no better when he eventually left school and worked on a fishing boat as a cook. He lost his job because of an incident where he put sugar instead of salt into the soup, thus causing much diarrhoea. This light touch of humour is characteristic of Crichton Smith's writing, as is the description of Murdo's one romance with a stout local spinster who had a grossly religious mother and who fed him cocoa and salt herring, a diet described in the story as ferocious, whereupon he ceased to visit her, unsurprisingly. At the start of the story, Murdo appears to be a victim who accepts his mundane, dull and conformist existence, and this contrasts starkly with his much more self-assured and individualistic attitude in the concluding paragraphs. The references to Murdo's work on the land include him using a scythe in the fields, and as the Grim Reaper is often depicted wielding a scythe, this portrayal of Murdo hints that his life is passing him by and that he may die without fulfilment. Yet by the end, we see a significant development in Murdo's character. He realises that his life to date has not been in any way fulfilling and that he is romantically interested in Mary, as suggested by the phrase strange flutterings to describe his feelings when he looks at the door. This word choice makes us think of the excitement of finding love for the first time. The painting of the door in symbolic red makes Murdo realise that he is not too late to start life anew again, even at the age of 46. Inspired by the fact that the red door stands out against the white snow, whose virginal new diamonds are symbolic of a fresh start, he decides to ring the changes and no longer to fear being different. He's now ready to break free of the fetters placed on him by the oppressive community and to strike out as an individual, letting colour into his previously dull life. Now let's look at Mary, who is similar to Murdo in some ways, namely she lives alone, doesn't gossip, is unmarried, is kind to children and appreciates creative pursuits and books. Yet while sharing these similarities with Murdo, at the same time Mary is so very different from him. For a start, she does not care what the villagers think about her, as suggested when her attitude is described as, "You can take me or leave me." Among the other things we learn about her are that she wrote poetry, that she owns a large number of books, that she is considered slightly odd by the villagers, and that Murdo thinks she must be very clever. Mary is associated with the colour red early on, and this is entirely in keeping with her portrayal as a highly creative and romantic woman. When the cockerel crows in a belligerent or aggressive manner as morning is breaking, its red claws link it to Mary's passionate and nonconformist nature. At the same time, the crowing of the cockerel heralds the start of a new day and symbolises an awakening in Murdo, his readiness to move on to a new chapter of his life. We also learn that Mary is prone to sudden bursts of rage. A volatile temperament is not unusual in highly creative people, and Murdo takes the rumours in the village of Mary's anger as being the sign of a spirit without servility. Mary's independent spirit is attractive to him, since he believes one couldn't marry a clod, which is a hint that he is thinking of Mary in a romantic context even at this point. Another aspect of Mary that Murdo finds alluring is that being a creative spirit, she's not afraid to wear bright colours such as red. He admires her elegance, which is in direct contrast to the dull Wellingtons and fisherman's jersey which most villagers wore, and which Murdo hated. You can bet that once he's with Mary, Murdo is going to kick those wellies into touch. The villagers. While we don't actually encounter any of the villagers directly during the story, their characterisation is still important to our understanding of the way in which small rural communities stifle individual expression, and the conflict between individuality and conformity. The fact that there's never been a red door in the village before, and that Murdo even has to contemplate the outrageous prospect of being hounded out of the village just because his door is red, emphatically underlines the fact that in small rural communities, individuality can be suffocated because people are genuinely afraid of standing out in any way. This is demonstrated, for example, when Murdo acknowledges to himself that having a red door certainly singled him out. Thank you for watching this video, and hope you found it useful. See you next time. In other videos on the red door, we look at key themes and key quotes from the story. If you found this or any of our other videos useful, it would be great if you could subscribe to the YouTube channel. Thanks for your support.